I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Listen again. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Of course, we're all children of God, but what exactly does that mean? In order to break this down, I'm going to start with a story from my college. It was the beginning of freshman year at Messiah College. I had recently been moved in by my family, and I had to say my goodbyes. This was not an easy goodbye. There was lots of tears had. It was kind of the gross one, but but we were, for the first time in my life, I was alone in the big world, or at least that's how it felt. My first week at Messiah was filled with event after event. I felt as though it had served as a distraction from being away from our families and home. During this time, we did many things, ranging from the freshman year games where we first at their houses and we won a trophy, to worship nights outside our dorms. One particular event stuck with me. We went to a cross in the woods right outside my dorm. This cross is called the Whitmer Cross. Tradition has it that the resident assistant will lead the members on their floor on a hike, and then we wind up at this cross. Ironically, it's right outside the dorm. The hike is not needed at all. But during that hike, we're supposed to pick up a rock, and you're supposed to pick that rock in particular because it's supposed to represent your burdens. So when we got to the cross, she said for us to pray our burdens into these rocks, to feel that weight of that rock, and to really absorb our burdens. And then we were supposed to put our burdens all into that rock and lay it at the bottom of this cross. And while we did this, we were listening to the song that was just up on the board. There's a lot more to that song. It's actually a really lovely song to listen to. And during this, I had these overwhelming feelings. I was speechless. I just didn't know what to say, but I knew I was overcome with emotions. I felt relieved, and I felt like God was with me in a time of desperate need for me. And that's the moment that I knew that God was with me at every moment, everything I did. So I told this story because it leads me to think about what it really means to be a child of God. It wasn't just the lyrics that we heard, but rather the physical act of giving our burdens to God and feeling the weight lifted off our shoulders in a time of need. When I think about being a child of God, I take note of 7 privileges that we have as children of God. The first one is security. Verse 15 of Romans 8 writes, "We are not to fear, but enjoy sonship. We fear so much in our lives as punishment, losing our jobs, losing loved ones, etc. But one of the most beautiful things about being a child of God is that we never lose our relationship with God. He is always there for us. He loves us, protects us through each and everything that life has to offer for us. The second privilege that we have is authority. The second part of verse 15 of Romans 8 writes, "We have the status of not a slave, but of sonship." Think about that verse in the beginning again. I'm no longer a slave of fear, but I am a child of God. If we live in a house of fear, we are slaves that have no authority over our own lives. Slaves can do only what they're told. However, once we break from this fear that makes us slaves, we become children of God. God gives his children the authority over sin and the devil. Children of God move about the world knowing that it belongs to God and that they shall not be fierce being surrounded by him. The third point is intimacy. Verse 15 of Romans 8 writes, "By him we cry, Abba, Father." In the Bible, it is written with both Abba and Father. Oftentimes, we don't hear children calling their fathers by Father, but rather by Dad, Daddy, or Papa. Using both Abba and Father gives us a different type of connection with God, however. Using terms such as Daddy, Dad, or Papa shows love, trust, and familiarity. Using a term such as these, or even Abba, shows a connection with God in a different way where it can almost serve as a thank you. The fourth point is assurance. Verse 16 of Romans 8 writes, "The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children." When we cry out to God, he reassures us that he is there beside us. He reminds us that we are part of his family. Now, I'm sure that can be a bit of a struggle with the term testimony or testifies. However, in turn, this actually means that we're already Christians and followers of God. We have his promises, and we can see our lives changing and growing in who he wants us to be. All of these pieces put together leads our spirit and our hearts to have the measure of confidence that we are truly his children. Fifth, inheritance. Verse 17 of Romans 8 writes, Now if we are a child, then we are heirs. This means that we have an incredible future. Now bear with me for a second. I'm currently taking a Bible class online, and we analyze the Old Testament and connect it to history and where they would intertwine. In ancient times, the firstborn son was the heir of the family. Although there may have been many children that were all loved, the heir got the largest share of the wealth and carried on the family name. This was how a family kept its influence intact and did not have it divided or dissipated. Now we're confronted with this verse that says, if we're children of God, then we're all heirs. This is truly breathtaking, especially considering what history has to say about heirs. Paul is telling us that basically, if we are children of God, that we are all going to be given so many blessings that we're going to feel like we're all the individual heir of our families. So the sixth point is discipline. Verse 17 of Romans 8 writes, Now if we are children, then we are heirs, if indeed we share his sufferings. When parents discipline a child, they allow or introduce a mild form of consequence in order to teach or mature their child away from behaviors that will lead to greater consequences later on. Hebrews 12:9-10 writes, We all have human fathers who discipline us, but God disciplines us for our own good. Any good father will lovingly discipline. He will not use his authority selfishly to indulge in his own need to feel more powerful or in control. But at the same time, he will not be needy for his child's love and approval. That he will never, I lost my place. He will never do what is hard or difficult. In other words, if you accept the painful discipline that God puts us through, however, God can never intends to hurt us, but he only intends to make us stronger. God does not punish us, but instead he leads us through the consequences when we don't use our free will according to his ways. The last point is family likeness. Verse 17 of Romans 8 writes, We share in his sufferings. Christians will suffer not simply in the pains that the world brings, but specifically because they are brother and sisters of Christ. Christ faced rejection because of who he was. He exposed sinfulness and warned of judgment, as well as he offered salvation through himself. We as followers of Christianity will face pains like these as well. I went to public schooling all through grade school. When some of my peers had found out that I was a Christian, and a proud Christian at that, they would give me much judgment. However, I felt comfort in having a relationship with God and knowing that he had plans in store for me and my peers. The more that we have encounters and realizations that these, whether it be in school or work, we come to better know God and grow in our relationship with him.